Hey, want to be reviewed? Just send your animations in the Professor Goo review channel in the Discord. Each stream, I'll be going over one animation, which will be randomly selected from that channel. If you happen to be in stream that day, we'll go over it and maybe even jump into a call. If you want to watch these streams live, go to twitch.tv/DylanGoo. Hey Goos, welcome to Professor Goo Reviews, where we talk about animation and stuff. Well, this is a submission by Shadow Knight, and it is a Minecraft animation with some lightning mesh trails, which I love. But yeah, it looks fantastic. Honestly, this overall is really cool and has some really good fundamentals. It's using a technique where the Minecraft character's arms and legs are actually fully straight, which is more difficult to animate, so huge props for that. And it's overall looking really dynamic and really natural despite that limitation. So let's talk about what we can improve within the style and also, you know, within the I guess like the intention of the piece. And yeah, with that in mind, we have about 3 things that I've looked over and I think could be improved. One of which is flip momentum, which is the momentum of flips. I think this particular flip here, as we can see this sort of back flip right here, it does require a bit of momentum preservation to get it to look perfect. Right now, it already looks pretty good, but we're gonna be we're gonna be adjusting it a little bit to see if we can get that to feel even better. We also have the concept of leaning. Leaning is a weird concept because it's something that I feel like isn't really properly addressed in a lot of animations. It's a technique that people use in real life where they just lean in a certain direction to account for center of mass and momentum differences, especially when they're turning and stuff like that. And I feel like by using it, you get more dynamic poses with your animations. So we're gonna lean into the leaning, and specifically for this section here. And for this section here, on top of the leaning, we also have the option to improve the wheel trajectories. So the wheels are a big part of the locomotion in this animation. So focusing on making sure the wheels feel believable as, you know, roller skates, as something that feels like it's actually functioning as roller blades or as wheels, you're going to want to pay attention to the wheel trajectories. It's something that, you know, it's a little bit more of a I guess like non-traditional form of locomotion that people don't really think about too much. But once you start to think about wheels and sort of think about, you know, other wheeled vehicles like bikes and cars and stuff like that, you'll notice like there's a certain way that wheels move, and you want to pay attention to that when you're trying to mimic that type of movement. Cool. So first thing we'll get into is flip momentum. This one's pretty easy. It's pretty simple. Again, these are just nitpicks. This already looks fantastic. But if we take a look at this flip, we'll notice that technically speaking, right? Like we have the guy flipping, and that's great. That's great, as you can see. The momentum is good. It's spinning at a constant speed, but then suddenly the momentum stops, right? You see how right here, the momentum just sort of stops right there. I think it's hardly noticeable at full speed because it happens so fast, but you'll notice that right here, he's still at the same angle. I actually think that what you have here is a good idea. Like, you've done a great job here, Shadow, with the foot placement, right? So that is really good. The foot coming out early is also fantastic. Really good fundamentals of flips. That's something that people do for sure. So that's good. But what I think is important is that while the foot opening up does reduce the momentum a little bit, it doesn't negate it entirely. So what we're actually going to be doing here is we're going to be having just a bit of a compromise, I guess, a transition point, where the momentum here doesn't have to move so fast here. Might I recommend, you know, a speed that's closer to this. And you'll notice that the body can continue spinning, you know, up until the point of contact, and still be quite believable, right? So this is more similar to how people might be flipping in real life. So it's just a bit of that additional momentum at the end there, which will keep it alive, and that will help a ton. So yeah, I do recommend that. It's a very small nitpick, to be honest, but it will help a bunch. So that looks great. Cool. So that's flip momentum. We have a little bit of that at the beginning too, but honestly, this flip looks fine. This flip itself could be improved if there is a bit more of a pivot here. So right here, this angle could probably be straight up preemptively. So I think in order to get this flip momentum to work properly, this axis of rotation has to be established before he leaves the ground. Okay, so that's actually a really hard thing to do, but basically you would do that, I think, by staying on the character left foot and then like moving on top of it, moving his center of mass on top of it right before the kickoff. And then you can get that momentum spinning along the axis before he leaves the ground. And the reason for that is because that's the only time where the momentum can really exist, right? The input vector can exist. If you have the input vector, like if you try to input the vector in the middle of the air, like if he actually jumps up like this, he's going to be wobbling the whole time, basically. That's just how momentum works. So you're going to want to make sure the axis is stable before he jumps. That'll be good. And you'll see that when you see actually like ice skaters and stuff, when they do like triple spins and stuff like that, you'll notice the rotational axis is set before they jump off the ground. Very, very important detail, right? So there's that. Cool. So that's flip momentum. Very simple thing, very small adjustment, but can make a big difference. Then we have the concept of leaning. So here's where leaning comes into play, right? I think this is a great opportunity for leaning. I noticed that you have him leaning forward, and he's actually more in this sort of actually technically a more stable pose, right? So this is technically leaning forward, sure, but I don't think he needs to lean forward. In fact, if he were to lean forward, it'd actually be very, very difficult for him to go in this direction, for him to start turning. So in order to lean into the turning, I would actually recommend that he leans backwards. And he can do that by, like, you know, in this pose, it's fantastic. But if he were to lean back so that he's more like this, yeah. So the other leg is sort of more bent, quote unquote, because it's got that weight on it, so that's good. So it'll look more like that, something like that. So what you have is this clear lean this way, right? He's leaning this way, and what that's actually doing specifically is it's putting a center of mass on this side, which helps him turn, right? It'll actually help him turn a lot better, and you can get a really cool pose here, for example. So now you have this really dynamic pose that also leans into his trajectory better, right? And that will help this shot feel more dynamic and overall just more believable, right? Anyway, you get the idea. So yeah, so that is something that I think if you lean into it, literally lean into the turn, that will just feel that much more dynamic, and it'll really, really help sell that that trajectory. And speaking of trajectory, we can talk about wheel trajectory, because that's exactly the same shot. So the wheel trajectory here, we're actually coming into a bit of an issue. I'm gonna hide this, make a new one. So the wheel trajectory is coming into a bit of an issue here, because if you actually trace the wheel, right, it's facing this way, right? It's facing this way, and then it's facing this way, and it's facing this way, and it's facing this way. But you'll notice that the direction that it's going, if I were to draw this in red, the direction that it's going is like, it's like that. See that? So the wheels are actually moving perpendicular to their rotational direction, right? So that's something that doesn't read quite as well than if they were moving along their rotational direction, right? Like if they were able to move along that direction, it would feel more believable. So I think if you were to have the wheel trajectory be a bit more, you know, along the lines of what his wheels are facing, where his wheels are facing, it would feel a little bit better. So you could have something like this instead, right? So by not rotating his body as much and just keeping the wheels in that way, but keeping the wheels sort of straight on like that, you would get a trajectory that would feel a lot more natural by having the wheels sort of go along this arc here. So that's something that I think would help improve the believability of these wheel mechanisms. Got scratched my nose. But yeah, that will help a lot. And that goes hand in hand with the leaning, I think, because it's a good pose to keep these guys on track. So I would keep those on there. And then right here, yeah, he could easily still go into this spin here, which would also be based on the wheel trajectory, and he could still do everything that he needs to. I've animated a similar character for Project Monty, by the way. So this is really, really cool to see. And I've done some similar things, but I think like the wheel trajectory thing is something that I remember feeling very strongly about at the time, because in order to get these circle wheels to work, you really have to lean into how sort of specific their trajectory is, because they literally cut into the ground, right? The roller blades, right? So like having that in there, my God, my nose is so itchy. Having them in there, basically means that the arcs of the wheels, the movement of the wheels, you really do have to follow that blade path. And that's honestly pretty much it. The effects look great. The momentum overall looks fantastic. Like the poses look really good. Like that last pose, this is really strong. Great pose there, right? I'm loving it overall. And I also think this initial sort of like rollerblading movement, that looks and feels really good, especially with the fact that he has no knees. It's incredible. But yeah, that's honestly the biggest thing. There's a couple small nitpicks here and there, but other than that, it's fantastic. So that's my review. That's what it is.